Hey there, and welcome to this beginner guide to Spline. In today's tutorial, we are going to walk you through the basics of working in the 3D space. By the end of this video, you'll have a solid understanding of how to move around in Spline's interface and to start building your own 3D objects. So let's get started. Once you've created your account and login, you'll have access to view your files. But before we dive in, let's quickly explore the UI here. This is the homepage where you see your recent files, latest tutorials, and example projects. In the left navigation bar here, you can access your files, notifications, tutorials, community, and more. For the team section here, this is where you can view all of your team projects and switch between teams. In the bottom left menu, here you can click on your archived files, updates, and access help and feedback. And of course, you can also click here to join our Discord community. When it comes to creating a new file, you can go either from the home page or the My Files page and click on the blue button in the top right corner to create a new file and begin building your 3D scene in Spline. Once inside, you'll see the example templates. We can click on one to use as an example, but for now, let's click off to the side to make it disappear. Now we're ready to start creating something new. Before we dive into creating shapes, let's take a quick look around Spline's interface so you're familiar with everything here. This will help you get comfortable with the workspace. At the top, this is our toolbar. This is where all of your tools are located for creating shapes, adding lights, and manipulating objects. Over on the left sidebar, you'll find all of the layers and objects in your scene. Here's where you can also add new scenes or UI scenes. Switch to the Assets tab and you can now open the Asset Browser in Team Library Manager, where you can grab and organize your resources. You can also click the hamburger icon here at the top. This will allow you to access options like creating a new file, duplicating, opening, or importing. And I also want to quickly call out, you can find version history here, which lets you view and restore previous versions of your file, track changes, and manually save new versions when needed. On the right, you'll see the Properties panel, where you can adjust the properties of your scene or selected objects and add some materials and so much more. We're going to be learning more about these features as we move forward. And the viewport where the action happens. This is where you'll see your objects, edit their properties, and view your final results. And it's important to note that when you design in Spline, everything is happening in real time. If we click here on this plus icon, this will give us access to more shapes and geometries. Just scroll down to explore all of the options. You'll also find the object library where you can browse different categories of ready-made 3D objects to add and customize. Here at the bottom, this is where you can add a new camera and lights. There's the point light, directional light, and spotlight. And this plus icon is also where you can enable features like paths, shape blend, and you can create particles. Next, there is the pen tool. This allows you to draw 2D shapes in the 3D space, like this. Just adding some extrusion here and done, giving the shape some depth to make it 3D. You can also click this icon to adjust the frame size. And here, the 100% refers to the zoom level of your scene. You can add a custom value here as well. And if you're working with a team, this icon lets you leave comments directly on your scene, which is perfect for giving feedback and collaborating. If you click on the Share button, here you can share files and invite others. You can select from Viewer, which means the person will be able to view and interact with your scene, but will not be able to edit or affect the original scene. However, they will be able to generate a duplicate. For editor, and will be able to make modifications. Or if you want to invite someone specific, select only people invited, then enter their email. You can simply copy and paste the link to share it. Or you can also specify the email of the invited person and select between viewer and editor here. You can enter one or multiple emails separated by commas and click invite. They will receive a notification via email and in their inbox tab within the Spline app. Additionally, you will find the publish option here to share with the community, which we will discuss later. And here you can enter play mode. This is going to give us a preview of our scene to show us what it will look like after we export it. So say we added some animations, this is how we can see how those animations turned out. Now, before we move on, let's talk about navigating within the 3D space. Now, for orbit, hold down Option and drag. If you're using Windows, you can use Alt and drag. To pan, just hold down the spacebar and drag around in your scene. Then for zooming in and for zooming out, all you need to press for Mac is Command and scroll, and for Windows, hit Control and scroll. Here at the bottom of the viewport, you can toggle between orographic and perspective views like this. Here you can quickly change the angle you are viewing your 3D object. You can go from side, top down, from another side, from the bottom, etc. This helps you navigate the 3D space with more ease as you are designing. You can also hit reset to quickly reset the view, and you can try using the isometric view here as well. If we go back to the top toolbar, we can add a camera from the drop-down menu. Now we can actually use this camera and view through it. In order to do that, you can select the camera in the viewport or on the layers panel, and then let's select use this camera. You can then switch back to the personal camera to continue designing. Make sure that you lock the camera that you've added so you don't move it by mistake. In Spline, everything exists in the 3D space, and that doesn't mean you cannot have 2D objects. They only have width and height, no depth to them, so that's why they remain flat. Even though 2D objects are flat, you can still move them around in the 3D space. You can also rotate it on any axis, even though it doesn't have depth. This just makes 2D objects really versatile for things like UI design or to add some extra visual elements to your scene. Now, what if we want to add some depth to the 2D object? That's where extrusion comes in. Extrusion turns flat 2D shapes into 3D objects by adding depth. First, select your 2D object, then go to the shape panel on the right side. Look for the extrusion option and drag the slider to add depth. And just like that, our 2D shape is now a 3D object. Now, as you can see, the right panel shows either the general scene settings or the properties of the selected object. If you don't have anything selected, or you can press escape, you'll see the properties that apply to the entire scene. In the viewport section, you can choose and switch between cameras for different perspectives or add a new camera here. In frame, you can set our scene size, enable guides, and you can toggle on and off auto zoom. This is for responsive layouts. Here you can click to change the scene's background color and adjust its opacity. And if you have multiple cameras in use, here next to play camera, this is where we can select which camera we want to use for export. Switching the camera here is going to automatically update it in the export panel settings, making it the active camera for when you are exporting the scene. Here in the light and simulation section, this allows you to adjust the ambient light or even enable things like physics and gravity to make your objects react to forces. And here you can enable post-processing effects like depth of field, bloom, pixelation, and more. By default, all of the effects are turned off, but you can easily toggle them on and off with the eye icon. And next we have fog, which is a really quick and easy way to add some depth to your scene. Quickly moving along here, we have ambient shadows, so you can enhance the realism with some global shadows in your scene. You can adjust the radius, tint, and the quality as needed. One thing to note though, effects and ambient shadows can enhance your scene beautifully, but just keep in mind that using too many at once can affect the performance, so use them strategically for the best results. Under global settings, you can adjust your grid plane, you can change which axis it is on or just turn it off. And for snapping, you can choose to have your objects snap to other objects or to the grid, making it that much easier when you're laying out your elements. It is especially useful for precise designs like UI elements. Just toggle it on and your objects will snap neatly to the grid as you move them around. Here on variables and data, you can click on the 4-dot icon to check or add new variables, connect new webhooks, or link a new API. We have more tutorials that explore some of these features in depth if you want to learn more. Here under Material, Color, and Image Assets, when you have no object selected, this is when you can find the list of your assets. So these can be materials, colors, images, etc. And you will find them here on the right sidebar, again with no object selected. And you have too many unused assets, all you need to do is click the 3 dots here to remove them, or if you want to duplicate one, you can do that as well. Now the best part about assets is they make editing easier. You can easily apply these to multiple objects, and any changes that you make to the asset will automatically be updated everywhere that asset is being used. They're also great for keeping your files efficient. We highly recommend using material assets. Now, if we click on an object, you'll see that the right panel is going to change. That's because we are now editing this object's properties. So let's go through them. Here at the top, we have states and events. This is where you can create your states and events. States are different versions of your object where you can change properties like the position, scale, rotation, and materials. To create a new state, just click the plus icon in the States panel. Adjust the object's properties, and then you can trigger the change between states using an event. You can add multiple states to the same object by clicking the plus icon again, and rename each state by double-clicking on it. Which is super helpful for keeping track of your object's transformations. Once you create a state, you can animate it or trigger it with an interactive event. Events will let you add these interactive behaviors to your design. If you want an object to react to your cursor or maybe animate when scrolling, this is where you make it happen. Clicking on this new event will open up a small panel. At the top, you'll see a drop-down where you can switch to different event types. For example, you can use a start event to trigger actions as soon as the scene loads, like a simple looping animation, or a mouse hover event to make something react when you hover over it. There are a ton of options like follow, game controls to create mini game experiences, drag and drop, scroll, even AI assistant interactions, and so much more. We'll explore state-based animations later in the video. And moving on, here you can adjust the position, scale, and rotation. The shape section here lets you tweak the size, sides, and corners, and options vary depending on the object. Clicking on Smooth and Edit will enable the modeling tools, allowing you to edit the geometries with extrusion, loops, and subdivisions for more complex shapes. In the material panel, you can change colors, opacity, blend modes, and layer multiple textures, images, gradients, and matte caps to create your material. If you want to reuse a material, like we talked about before, this is when you want to convert it to an asset. You can also find other tools and settings like Align to Path, so this will make your objects follow a path and adjust their orientation, offset, and slide. Also adjust the visibility here under the visibility panel. This allows you to show or hide an object's wireframe, or you can switch it to flat mode or toggle between both front or back views. Here next to shadows, this allows you to determine if your object can cast or receive shadows. And cloner, this is a very easy way to duplicate your 3D objects. You can choose from radial, linear, grid, or you can use object type. This lets you align clones to another object's surface. And you can also apply randomness to give the pattern some more variation. Cloner is a really great tool, and there's a lot more to learn about it, so we linked some tutorials down in the description where you can do a deeper dive. Now, if you want to rotate or move an object around a specific point, you'll need to know how to adjust the pivot. By default, your objects will rotate around their center, but you can change it very easily, and here's how. Select your object, then press Command plus G, or for Windows, it'd be Control plus G, to group them. Now hold Option or Alt on Windows and click the group layer on the left sidebar. This allows you to access the pivot point, and you'll see that you can move it using the gizmo. This is very helpful for when you want objects to rotate in a unique way. Now let's dive into Boolean operations. These are a very powerful tool that lets you combine, subtract, and intersect objects. So let's talk about the three main operations. Subtract will remove the overlapping parts of objects. Where intersect creates a new object from the parts where the two objects are overlapping, and union will combine the two objects into one. Just be mindful, Booleans can be performance heavy, so try to reduce the size of your objects for a smoother performance. Now let's talk quickly about text. By default, the text is going to be 2D, but you can easily convert it to a 3D object by adding extrusion like we did before. So let's create some text and turn it into a 3D shape. So we can do that by clicking the text tool here in the top toolbar, then click and drag where you want your text to be created. From the text panel, here you can adjust the font size, family, and apply extrusion to give it depth. Now you've got a 3D text object that you can manipulate just like any other shape. Let's talk about animation. Spline makes it super easy to animate your objects. In Spline, we can use state-based animation. This involves creating different states for an object in your scene. Creating object states, all you need to do is select your object, and like we looked at before, you just go over to the state panel and you click the plus icon to create your new state. Now, the state is automatically selected, allowing you to modify the properties of your 3D object, like scale it, position it in a different spot, rotation, or color. You can view your changes by switching between the base state and the state to see the difference in your object's appearance or behavior. Let's quickly add an event to trigger the changes between states. As you can see, the start event is the default event, but there are a ton of other ones to choose from. But for today's example, let's use the mouse hover event. With our event selected, we need to add our transition and apply our state. You can select your base state here and then the state. Between these two states, we have to adjust the amount of time it takes for the change between the states to play out. Then we can pick the type of transition we want, something like ease in out or linear. And beside delay here, you can set how many seconds you want to delay the transition and set it to loop here. And now if we go to play mode, we can see how our animation plays out. Since this tutorial is more of an overview of Spline, we again have linked a more detailed tutorial on how to animate using state-based animation down below, so make sure to check that out too. Now, when you are ready to share your work, Spline makes it extremely easy to export. To export your scene, just head to the top toolbar and click on Export. From there, you will see different export options available. You can export for the web using options like the public URL, viewer, or code export. There are also options for the Apple and Android platforms, as well as other 3D formats. And you will find two main sections in this. We have the overview section and we have the play setting sections. Play setting lets you control how your scene behaves in play mode or after exporting. Now let's take a look at the main scene section. You can choose which scene will load first, because you might have multiple scenes in one file. And here in the camera section, you can select your main camera, making sure everyone sees the same view. If you're using a starter, professional, or team subscription, you can also remove the Spline logo from your export. And there's also so many other settings that we can tweak. For example, you can hide the background so your embedded 3D has a transparent look. You can allow or disable page scrolling, and even decide if the cursor should be visible or not. If you want to lock the movement, you can control the orbit, pan, and zoom settings. You can also add hover effects, set precise orbit and pan limits, and even activate an animated turntable to automatically rotate your scene on the Y-axis. And if you're working with a large scene, you can adjust the compression level or geometries and images and enable preload to improve loading times. In Overview, you can get a quick summary of your scene setup and adjust some other settings as well. For example, if you're using mouse events in your scene, you can choose between local and global, depending on whether you want your interaction to affect just the canvas container or the entire full window. You can also check the performance panel and run a test to see if there's any optimization opportunities. And if you've made change to your scene and want to make sure it's updated, just click Update Viewer. This will refresh the content, keeping everything up to date. And to quickly integrate into your scene, just copy the embed code here and paste it into your site's body or the HTML embed. And that's it. It works smoothly with most web builders, frameworks, and browsers. If you check out the Spline docs, we have some articles there on different integrations that you can do with Spline, and they are pretty easy step-by-step guides on embedding those 3D scenes code-free into a variety of different web builders and even Figma. Now let's quickly talk about importing content into Spline. You can do this by clicking on the Import Open option in the main menu, side bottom area, or on the top right corner, and simply selecting the file that you want to import. Another very quick way is by using the shortcut Command+O for Mac and Control+O for Windows. Or you can drag and drop compatible files directly into the viewport. Spline supports various file types, including 3D models like FBX, GLB, GLTF, OBJ, etc., images, and vector files like SVGs, which can be converted into 3D. You can also import videos, sounds, and more to enhance your scenes. As well, you can import animated 3D objects. Spline supports FBX and GLB, GLTF files with animations, including skeletal animations. You can also access the Spline Community platform directly from the Spline app. It's a space where designers can publish their 3D designs, discover and follow other creators, like, comment, and remix scenes to learn and find inspiration. You can share your scenes with the community in 3 ways. While in your scene, click the Share button here in the top right corner of the editor. Then select Publish and follow the instructions to publish in the community. You can also go to the Community tab here in the left-hand navigation bar and click the Publish button to select your design. Or you can even do it from the feed tab here on the community page and find the post section. Just click on publish to share your design directly. This makes it easy to showcase your work and connect with other Spline designers. Now, before we wrap up this tutorial, I want to call out some of our newer features. Shape Blend is a 3D modeling technique that combines sign distant fields, or SDFs for short, with polygonal systems to create smooth, flexible shapes. Unlike traditional polygonal modeling, SDFs define shapes mathematically, which allows for this smoother blending like this. And you can use advanced operations like union, subtraction, and intersection. We've linked our Shape Blend tutorial down below. It's really fun to play with this new feature, so I highly encourage you to go and try it, and this is free for anyone to use. All right, now you've got the basics down. It's time to explore more advanced features like materials, lighting, and animations. We have a variety of videos like we've mentioned throughout this video linked down in the description. We want to show you that the possibilities with Spline are endless, and we really can't wait to see what you create. Join the Spline community as well to share your work, get feedback, and learn even more. Happy designing, and we'll see you next time.